everybody, and welcome back to the Better Happy podcast, hosted by myself, Mike Jones. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you the 3P mindset hacks, and these are specifically focused on helping you avoid overwhelm and get better results without feeling stressed at work. So they work, they're really important to understand in a leadership or management position, and I'll also share with you how we've come to grouping these three together from working with hundreds of managers across loads of different organizations and seeing the same challenges over and over again. But before I jump into those, let's just ask the question, why are we here? Why is this podcast being recorded? Why are you listening to this today? And the reason that we're creating this podcast is because getting promoted to management or leadership is a reward. It's a reward for you being fantastic at what you do, having a good attitude, and making the business or organization or whatever it is you're part of better by leveraging you, by spreading the way you do things throughout the organization. So it's a reward. It's meant to be a reward that is a way of thanking you for being as good as you are and giving you the opportunity to create leverage. But the reality is that for most leaders and managers, or for a very high percentage of leaders and managers, going into these roles actually comes as a negative. Last year, some data came out from Slack, which showed that 45% of managers so that's actively reporting. So we found get to that 45% openly reporting it. And then there was some data as well from Deloitte. And this was on senior execs, so execs, CEOs, senior leaders, and this data from last year showed that 75%, or maybe it was 74, but it's that around that number, were actively considering leaving their role to go to a company that did a better job of supporting their well-being. So what that tells us is that managers and leaders on a very high percentage are experiencing work as a negative. And I'm not sharing this with you to make you feel unhappy about your role or suggest that you should leave it, but I'm just sharing it with you to highlight that there's a problem. And many of these problems stem from the fact that the world we live in is changing rapidly. We live in a time unlike any other time in human history. And of course, time's always changing, but the speed in which it's changing now is truly unlike anything we've ever seen before. And the challenge is that when you're in a management and leadership role, the faster things change, the more uncertainty and stress that sends your way. And if you're not equipped to deal with that uncertainty and stress mentally, then you're going to experience that as a negative. And that's not a good thing, because it means that the good people like yourselves that we're putting into these roles are actually having a hard time in the roles that are supposed to be a reward. So the reason that I put this podcast together is because, firstly, I believe that our work is integral to our health and our happiness. And I believe that when we improve happiness levels through our businesses, we're going to make the world a better place and make our businesses better. I could talk about this for hours. I'm not going to bore you with it today. But 9% of employees are engaged in the UK, and that's got to be linked to the fact that so many of our managers and leaders are burning out. If your managers and leaders are burnt out and stressed and tired, then your employees aren't going to have a good experience, and it becomes a lose-lose. I talk about the revolving door. What a lot of companies do is they have a revolving door for great talent. We promote our best people to management roles. We don't develop them. They get stressed, they struggle, so they go straight back out the revolving door and out of the company. Whereas an escalator, we want to take good people in, like yourselves, promote you to management and leadership, but develop you to thrive in that role. So bring you up a level on the escalator so that then you can thrive and you can make sure that your teams thrive too. And I don't think you need to go on loads of courses and spend a fortune to be able to get to that level. I actually think it's relatively straightforward, and that's why we create this podcast, so that you can learn how to thrive in the management role, learn how to see that role as a reward, learn how to get really good results and enjoy the process, learn how to engage your team without it being complicated, just breaking it down to simple bite-size pieces of information that help us actually figure out how to be happy in this role that we're in. So that's why the podcast exists. What we're going to talk about today then is a bit shorter than normal. I'm just going to give you a 3P mindset hack, and I think these are really easy to remember. That's why I like the 3 Ps, and they rhyme, which is unintentional, but perhaps I was a rapper in my previous life. So if you get these 3 Ps in place, you will find that you are able to achieve better work-life balance, get really good results for yourself and your team, be able to switch off from work, and all of that will be done with this undercurrent of work being quite rewarding and quite enjoyable. That's what we want, right? We want to be able to have a team that like us, have a team that get results, feel like we're making changes in the business, and be able to switch off and spend time with our families. And that's what these 3 Ps will help with. If you haven't got these 3 Ps in place, it's going to be the opposite. And this is unfortunately the reality for most leaders and managers. So without these 3 Ps in place, you're going to overwork, you're going to overthink and struggle to switch off from work when you go home. You're actually not going to get as good results, and you're going to have this undercurrent of your work all the time, this undercurrent feeling of stress and anxiety and impending doom. So obviously, I hope for most of us, we'd much prefer the earlier option there, not the latter. So I'm just going to break into these 3 Ps for you now, and I'm not going to overcomplicate it. I'm just going to go pretty simple with them. Just hearing them isn't what we need to implement them. We need to work on it. We need to comprehend what's being shared here and then go away and try and practice. But I promise you that if you do embrace these 3 Ps and try to implement them and start taking action on them, because I'm going to give you an action point on each one, you will find that you start becoming one of those managers that just makes it look easy and work becomes enjoyable. So the first P is perfectionism. Many managers, especially managers, but often leaders as well, are perfectionists. And if you think about it, before you got to management role, having this perfectionist tendency, wanting to do everything to the highest of standards, served you well. It got you recognized as being a good worker that works to a high standard and gets great results. So it's something that served you well and something that you're proud of, and rightly so. The problem is that before you reach management, you get paid for doing. Okay, you get paid to do things. It's as simple as that. Once you get into management, you're no longer getting paid just to do things. You're now getting paid to achieve results, create value, create leverage. That's why you get paid more money. So if you carry on leading with your perfectionist tendency, it's going to very quickly start working against you, because you're going to be trying to do everything to such a high standard that you're going to struggle to let other people do things for you because they can't do it to the standard that you can. And you're going to struggle to achieve the volume of things that you need to achieve because you're trying to do each thing to the highest of standards. Not only are you going to struggle to get results, you're going to start to be very tough on yourself and start to be your own worst critic, because you're going to be putting out a lot of volume, and this little perfectionist devil that's sat on your shoulder that used to be your friend is going to be telling you that everything you do isn't good enough, and you're going to get found out. So you have to recognize that you have a perfectionist tendency, and as a worker it served you well, but as a manager it's going to actually start working against you. I'm not suggesting for a moment that you should significantly lower your standards and the quality of work that you like to put out there, but you are going to have to make peace with not doing everything to 100% of what you think it should be done. And the best hack that we can have here to go alongside the first P is to think about 80%. I guarantee that your standards, your 100% what's good enough for you, is too high. It doesn't need to be that high. So you're going to have to start making peace with, if I want to make progress, if I want to get results, if I want to make the business grow, make the team grow, make things better, I'm going to have to start making peace with 80%, not 100%. Once you start to do that, there's a couple of things that happen. The first thing that happens is it teaches you that your 100% is an unnecessary amount of work, because you start putting your 80% out there, it still gets just as good results and you don't get any kickback or very little. So that's the first thing that it does. It takes this burden off your shoulder of trying to do everything to a perfect standard. The second thing that it does, which is also very powerful, is it frees up your ability to empower your team. When you think it's got to be done to the 100% perfect standard that you want to do it, nobody else can do it. And it's true, they can't. You've got a very unique set of experiences and skills and background that have enabled you to be able to get to the position where you can do this thing to 100%. And it's virtually impossible to find anybody else that can do it that way. But once you start making peace with 80%, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can train people to do this, and it's not the hardest thing in the world, and I can empower a team, and I can trust my team to do this to 80%. So you've got to start making peace with 80%. And a little business case study I'd like to share on this is a very big case study, is the Apple iPhone. So think about Apple iPhone. The Apple iPhone is one of the most highly sold, profitable products of our existence on this planet. And we're on iteration maybe 14 now, I don't know, a lot. And if you think about it, what that means is that the first one was awful in comparison to the one that we have today. But what Apple didn't do was sit there and say, we're going to wait until we've perfected the iPhone and we've got all of the best cameras and software and systems on it, and then we'll release it. That's not what they did. They said, we're going to get it to a really good standard, then we're going to release it, then we're going to use feedback from our clients and our early adopters to make it better. And then the fact that we're going to make it better means that we can sell even more. So if they'd waited for it to be perfect, they'd have never got anywhere. I was talking to a team not long ago, and they were doing some video training for some other members within for the wider business. And I remember talking to them, having this pep talk with them, and they were saying, right, it's going to take us 6 months. And then in 6 months, we can really polish it and get it to this standard, and then we can release it. And I said to the team, well, why don't you do it in 1 month and not do it to anywhere near that standard, but get it out to your wider employees, and then use their feedback to make it better. Because here we've got two options. We've got option one, where you spent 6 months making this thing really neat and really smart, and then you release it, and then maybe it's great, but maybe it's got loads of issues that you need to fix. Or we've got option two, which is you release it 1 month from now, then you use feedback, and then think about the quality that thing's going to be at with feedback 4 months after that. So at the same time, it's 6 months. So at 6 month points, we've got two different things. We've got one thing that's really polished, but it's had no feedback from our employees, or we've got one thing that's had 4 months of feedback from employees and has been adapted due to that feedback. You know as well as I know that the second option is going to be better. But if we'd let the perfectionist within us not let us do that, we would have just dragged output out there because we wanted it to be perfect, and it wouldn't have been anywhere near as good. So you have to move away from being a perfectionist. It's not good for you. It's not good for your team. It's not good for the business. 80% max. Okay, second P then. The second P is Parkinson's law. So Parkinson's law tells us that a task expands to fill the time that we allow it. A task expands to fill the time that we allow it. So if I give myself 30 minutes to create a beautiful new email signature, it's going to take me 30 minutes. If I give myself 8 hours to create a beautiful new email signature, I'm going to spend 8 hours on it. And this is true across everything that we do. So what happens with managers, especially if we're suffering with a bit of imposter syndrome, and leaders, is we tell ourselves we're not doing a good enough job. We tell ourselves that, you know, everybody's just waiting to find us out for not being competent, and that everything we do isn't good enough, and you add some perfectionism onto that, and obviously you can see how it becomes very stressful very quickly. So what we do is we say, well, I'll make up for it by working more, because everything I do isn't good enough, so I'll just start taking work home with me. And then what we're doing is Parkinson's law is we're mentally expanding the time that we're allowing work to spread to our own personal lives. And that very, very quickly becomes draining and emotionally exhausting, and has negative impacts on the rest of our life. It's a downward spiral. You know, if you start taking work home regularly, not as the exception but as the rule, you start not spending time with your family, you start not switching off from work, you start getting mentally fatigued, you start not looking after your health, you start dreading work on a Monday, you start not having clarity because you're never switching off, and it's this quick downward spiral, and it all stems from a lack of self-belief and self-confidence. So what you've got to do is you've got to be strict. You've got to know that, okay, if I mentally accept that I can take work home, I will, and then all my tasks are just going to fill and expand into my own time. So what you need to do is be really strict with your time, and set some strict rules in place where you say that's my cut-off time for work. Now, of course, there are going to be times when you might have to stretch that a little bit, but you need to be vigilant on your guard that is only the exception, not the rule. Okay, I have pretty strict working hours that I stick to as a business owner, because I know that if I don't, I will overwork. And I sometimes have to go outside of those hours because things come in last minute, or I have to deal with a thing. But if it starts becoming regular, I know that's an issue with my discipline and my mindset, not with the work. Okay, I can stick to my timings, and the world doesn't come to an end. So be really strict with your Parkinson's law. You can get enough achieved in the time that you set. So set that time and be clear on what you've got to achieve and get those things done. Don't start taking work home. Another concept there is to also understand that there's a never-ending list of problems in a business, which is going to lead me on to the third P. But there's a never-ending list of things to do. So if you're just letting your time expand all the time, you're just going to fill that with more and more stuff. So you've got to be strict. There has to be some rules. It comes to nobody's benefit if you're letting your work spread into your personal life. And it doesn't make you perform better either. So even if you're sat there as a young manager going, well, it's going to help me get ahead, it won't. It won't help you get ahead. People respect and admire people that get results in set time, not people that just work all the time. And then finally, the third P is the Pareto principle. So the Pareto principle tells us that 80% of our results come from 20% of our efforts. And it's you can geek out on this. It's something that's like a universally true rule. If we look at the universe, we will find that like 20% of the light, 80% of the light comes from 20% of the stars. It's crazy when you start looking into it, how universal this rule is across life and the universe. But think about that at work. The Pareto principle, 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. What does that tell us? It tells us that all of us, myself included, spend a lot of time on things that aren't really worth our time, that don't really get us results. And we're just doing them because they're a habit, because it's what other people used to do. So what you've got to do as a leader and a manager is be really good at analysing what you're doing and cutting out stuff that's just not a good use of your time. Historically, businesses that got ahead when we were in the Industrial Revolution period were the businesses that could produce the most, the businesses that could put the most output out. But in today's world, output's no longer valuable. Everybody can put out tons of output now, and that's just been increased again. If you think about AI, literally content on the internet, you can get something to write it for you and schedule it for you. So the ability to put out is becoming less and less valuable. And the businesses and teams and people that are going to be the most successful moving forwards aren't the ones that can do the most, but the ones that can do the least better, the ones that can do the things that matter really well. When one business or team's trying to do everything and not do a very good job of anything, another team or business that's focusing on a few things with the disciplined pursuit of less is going to be significantly outperforming that business. If you don't believe me on this and you think I'm just pipe dreaming, I'd highly recommend reading Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And this will show you numerous business examples, including Under Armour, how companies went from trying to do everything and just chugging along, not making much progress, to getting focused on a few things, to cutting out all the things that were good ideas but just not the right thing at the time, and getting laser focused on a few things, how they really transformed their businesses and started to make progress. So as a manager, you've got to really think about that with your team and with your personal life. You've got to get really good as a manager at saying no to stuff and cutting stuff out that isn't a good use of your time. Now, this brings with it its own mental health challenges, and I did a previous podcast on the unique mental health challenges of managers and leaders. This brings with it its own challenges of having healthy conflict, saying no to people, challenging things, things of that nature. These are unique challenges that you have as a manager or leader. So these 3 Ps are quite good because they force you to have these conversations. They force you to go into a bit of healthy conflict. They force you to look at yourself. And again, with the Pareto principle, the 80-20, how do you do that? Well, what you have to do is you have to create time regularly as a manager to review what's going on and try and improve efficiencies. Now, this is quite difficult for managers, especially new managers, because we have always, as I've already mentioned, felt that we get rewarded for hard work, what I call Q1 activities, urgent and important, right? The things that need to be done right now. Somebody tells us what to do, we get on with it. Now, once you're a manager, if you just focus on important, urgent tasks all the time, you're going to very quickly get busy doing the wrong things, and your team's going to get disenfranchised, and you're going to get tired. So, as a manager, think about it as you're commanding a ship, right? So, when you're rowing the ship, you just sit there and you row, and somebody says row and you row, and your job is to just row, and you get paid and fed for your ability to row. When you step up to management, you become the kind of master of the rowers. So now, instead of just rowing yourself, you've got to give the rowers direction on how to row, but you've also got to stand and look at where you're going and listen to the person that's reading the map and think about which direction the boat's going in, and do we need to row harder on one side than the other. And if you didn't take the time to do that, the boat would start going in the wrong direction and everyone would start getting very pissed off. So would you. So your temptation is to just work all the time because you used to be a rower and that's what served you well, but you've got to step away from that, and you've got to start carving out time on a weekly, daily, monthly, quarterly basis to actually review. And when you first do that, it's going to feel uncomfortable. I know this because I did it in my first business. I thought I just had to be busy all the time. And when anybody talked to me about strategy or business planning, I didn't want to do it because I've been a hard worker all my life. So I wanted to work hard because that's what I thought was going to work well. What it led to was me being inefficient and getting burnt out and not growing the business anywhere near the speed that I could have because I was too focused on just being busy all the time. So you've got to carve that time out to plan. And like I said, it's going to feel uncomfortable at the beginning, but once you start to get the results from it and you start to see the impact that it has on your team and your results by actually taking time to step back, look at what's going on, analyze, give yourself permission to not be busy. Once you see the results of that, it will start to become a healthy addiction, because what it also teaches you is that you're no longer being rewarded primarily for your ability to be busy. And this is when the magic starts to happen, because once you get good at this stuff, you start to realize actually you're getting paid more to do less. You're getting paid more because you know what you're doing, you're good at thinking, you're good at looking at how things should be done, and you're good at getting a team to do it for you as opposed to just do it all yourself. And that's what you actually get rewarded for. So management and leadership should be rewarding. It's a gift. It's something that's been gifted to you for you being good at what you do. If you don't adapt yourself, if you don't get development, you go through the revolving door. You struggle in the role, you get stressed, you go straight back out of the company or asked to get put back down to a role where it's less stressful. If you develop yourself, and ideally a company do this for you, but they don't always because they're busy. If you develop yourself and you go on the escalator, you raise your skills, you raise the way that you're thinking about work, you raise your game plan. And with that, you start to become able to enjoy that role and to achieve leverage and to get better results whilst doing less. And why shouldn't you? That's what you've been rewarded that position for. So the 3 Ps: perfectionism. Make sure you settle for 80%, not 100%, and be really strict. Parkinson's law: limit your time, give tasks time, stick to them. And Pareto principle: 80% of your results are coming from 20% of your effort. So make sure that you're spending time regularly to cut out the crap that's not leading to results and isn't a good use of your time, so that you can focus on what's important. That is the 3 Ps. I've spoken a lot there. I'd love to see how many words I fit into these 20, 30-minute podcasts. I hope you found that useful. If you are finding these useful, please do contact me or comment below the posts or the podcasts, wherever you're watching or listening to them. If you've got anything you'd like us to talk about or you'd like us to cover, or you'd like to share a story, please do, because that helps us curate this content to be even more powerful for you. So I'll leave you today with the same thing that I leave you with every week, and that is our motto, our guiding principles at Better Happy, and that is that, unsurprisingly, work, teams, business and life are better happy.